Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going to tackle a topic that's both fascinating and a little bit spooky.
Oh, yeah.
It's the idea that consciousness might exist beyond the brain.
Hmm.
So we've got research, personal accounts, and even some scientific theories that suggest our understanding of consciousness might just be scratching the surface.
It's pretty intriguing, isn't it? We are going to be exploring everything from near-death experiences to apparitions,
Wow.
mediumship messages through electronic devices,
Uh-huh.
and even past lives and reincarnation.
Yeah, we're going deep down the rabbit hole today.
Wow.
But first,
Okay.
let's start with near-death experiences, or NDEs.
Okay.
Our sources define these as intense psychological events that happen when someone is close to death.
Right.
What makes them so interesting are the common themes that come up in these accounts.
Yeah, that consistency is really striking. People from all walks of life, different cultures and different belief systems report similar experiences.
Exactly. Like the out-of-body experience where people describe seeing themselves and the events around them from outside their physical body. It's almost like they're floating above it all, just watching.
Yeah. And many also describe traveling through a tunnel towards a bright light, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and love,
Wow.
and encountering deceased loved ones or beings of light.
And then there's that classic element of the NDE, the life review. Watching your whole life flash before your eyes, seeing all your choices and actions from a different perspective.
Yeah, it's often described as panoramic and emotionally intense, where people relive the good and the bad.
Our sources are packed with these incredibly vivid NDE accounts, like the story of Maria, a migrant worker who had 2 cardiac arrests. While they were resuscitating her, she described leaving her body and watching the medical team work on her.
Really?
Yeah, and she even recounted specific details about the equipment and the conversations they were having.
That's incredible.
Hmm.
Maria's case is a good example of the kind of detailed and verifiable information that some NDEers report. It makes it harder to dismiss these experiences as just hallucinations.
Absolutely. And then there's Pam Reynolds,
Okay.
who had a near-death experience during brain surgery.
Oh.
Yeah, so she was supposed to be completely unconscious, but she accurately described specific details of the operating room, the instruments they were using, and even the music playing in the background.
Pan's case is particularly intriguing because it challenges our understanding of consciousness and the brain.
Yeah.
How could she have these conscious experiences when her brain was basically offline?
Right. It's like those explanations just don't cut it. And there's also the story of Will Murtha, who nearly drowned and had a premonition of his wife receiving the news of his death, all while he was still struggling to survive.
Oh, geez.
Thankfully, he pulled through. But these cases, and countless others, suggest that there's more to consciousness than we understand.
It really does make you think. While we may not have all the answers, these first-hand accounts are valuable pieces of the puzzle. They point to a deeper reality, one where consciousness might not be confined to the physical brain.
Okay, so NDEs are definitely thought-provoking. But let's move on to another aspect of this consciousness beyond the brain idea, apparitions, and after-death communication. What are we talking about here? Ghosts, messages from beyond.
Well, it's more nuanced than just ghosts or spirits. These cases suggest that consciousness might persist after death and even interact with the living, sometimes conveying information or messages.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the sources highlight some pretty wild examples, like the case of the unnamed colonel who saw the apparition of his friend Major Poole.
Huh.
Yeah, and it depicted details about his death in South Africa before any news had arrived. The details of the uniform, the beard, all match up perfectly later.
Wow, so the information conveyed by the apparition was later verified.
Exactly. It wasn't just his imagination. And then there's Agnes Piquet, who saw a vision of her brother Edmund drowning. Her vision included specific details about how he was entangled in ropes, which were later confirmed by the crew of the tugboat involved. Spooky, right?
That is spooky. These cases, along with many others documented throughout history, suggest a pattern. We're not talking about vague feelings here, but specific details that are difficult to explain.
Absolutely. And then we have those cases where information from an apparent apparition has real-world consequences, like the case of James Chaffin and his will, where information from an apparition was used in a court of law to settle a dispute.
You kidding?
Nope.
Chaffin's case highlights how this type of communication could impact the physical world.
It really makes you wonder, if these experiences are real, how do we explain them? Are we talking about spirits, souls, some kind of psychic connection?
Those are the big questions. And while we don't have all the answers, it's worth considering different perspectives. For instance, some researchers point to the Akashic Field theory, which proposes a kind of universal information field, a cosmic record of all events thoughts, and experiences that consciousness might be able to access.
So it's like this massive cosmic library where everything that has ever happened is stored.
Exactly. It's a fascinating concept, and it might offer a framework for understanding how information seemingly from deceased individuals could be accessed or perceived.
We'll definitely need to delve into that Akashic Field theory a bit later. But for now, I think the takeaway is that these apparitions and after-death communications, however we explain them, are not just random, isolated events. They point to a deeper reality where consciousness might play a far more significant role than we currently understand.
I think that's right.
All right, so we've talked about near-death experiences and apparitions, but what about mediums? Those people who claim to communicate with the dead? Is there any validity to that, or is it all just smoke and mirrors? Clever tricks to prey on the grieving.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag out there. Our sources make it clear that we need to distinguish between physical mediumship, with all its potential for staged illusions,
Right.
and mental mediumship,
Right.
which is where things get more intriguing.
Right. We're less interested in table tipping and more interested in those cases where mediums seem to be genuinely receiving information from, well, somewhere else. So how does this mental mediumship work?
Well, essentially, it involves the medium entering an altered state of consciousness, often described as a trance, and relaying messages or impressions they receive, seemingly from deceased individuals.
So the medium acts as a kind of conduit or receiver for these communications.
Exactly. And just like with apparitions and after-death communication, we have to approach these cases with a discerning but open mind. There have been plenty of fraudulent mediums throughout history exploiting people's grief for profit.
Yeah. Our sources mention the spiritualism craze that kicked off in the 19th century with the Fox sisters and their supposed communication with spirits. It was a wild time with both genuine phenomena and elaborate hoaxes mixed together. It's a cautionary tale about being critical even when things seem spooky.
Indeed. But even amidst the trickery, there are cases that are hard to explain away. The Society for Psychical Research, which we mentioned earlier, conducted rigorous investigations of mediums under controlled conditions. And even those skeptical researchers encountered phenomena they couldn't easily dismiss.
One of those head scratchers is the cross correspondences, right? That whole thing initiated by Frederick Myers, a researcher who was really into the paranormal after he died.
Yes. After Myers' death, messages seemingly from him started popping up through different mediums, often located miles apart. The crazy thing is, these messages only made sense when you piece them together like some kind of cosmic jigsaw puzzle.
It's almost like he was orchestrating this elaborate communication from beyond the grave just to prove a point about consciousness persisting and communicating in these intricate ways.
And the complexity of those cross-correspondences makes it difficult to attribute them to just chance or the medium's subconscious knowledge. It's as if Myers was using his knowledge of literature and classical allusions to create a kind of coded communication that only made sense when all the pieces were assembled.
Super clever, but definitely a bit cryptic. Another case that's just wild is the one with Eileen Garrett, the Irish medium, and the R-101 airship crash. She seemingly received technical details of the crash and even messages from the deceased pilot before any of that information was publicly available.
Garrett's case is fascinating because she was skeptical of the idea that she was channeling spirits. She believed her control, an entity called Uvani, was an aspect of her own subconscious. But regardless of the source, the information she relayed was accurate and detailed.
It's as if she was tapping into some kind of information field, or perhaps even connecting with the consciousness of those who had died in the crash. And then we have cases where mediums seemingly provide information that helps solve crimes, like with the murder of Jacqueline Poole medium. Christine Holohan gave the police details about the crime, including things only the victim would have known years after it happened, and that information helped crack the case.
It's these kinds of cases where the information can be verified and has real-world consequences that make it harder to dismiss mediumship as mere trickery.
Definitely makes you think twice. And then there's that story of the chess game between a living grandmaster, Victor Korknoy, and a deceased grandmaster, Geza Moroxi, played through a medium who didn't even know how to play chess.
The chess game is particularly interesting because it involves a specific skill set and a unique style of play that the medium couldn't have faked. It really does suggest that something beyond the medium's knowledge and abilities was at play.
It's like a paranormal Sherlock Holmes mystery. So where does all of this leave us? Are mediums actually talking to the dead, or are there other explanations?
Well, like many things in this realm, there's no easy answer. While some cases might be attributed to fraud psychic abilities or subconscious knowledge, there are others that defy those explanations.
It's like some of these cases are just too specific, too detailed, too weird to fit into those neat little boxes.
Exactly. And that's why some researchers are open to the idea that consciousness might be able to operate outside the physical brain, and that mediums in their altered states might be tapping into that realm of discarnate consciousness.
Okay, so we've got mediums potentially tuning into the realm of the dead, and now we're going to layer on another mind-bending concept, instrumental transcommunication, or ITC. What's that all about?
ITC is the idea that we can use technology to communicate with the other side. Think spirit voices on tape recorders, ghostly images on TV screens, that sort of thing.
So we're talking ghost hunting with gadgets. That's pretty cool. But isn't a lot of this just pareidolia, our brains tricking us into hearing words or seeing patterns in random noise?
Pareidolia is definitely a factor to consider, and responsible researchers take steps to rule out mundane explanations. But some cases are harder to dismiss. One of the earliest forms of ITC is electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. This involves recording seemingly anomalous voices on audio tapes or digital recordings, often amidst static or white noise.
Ah, the classic ghost voices on tape. I've heard about people doing this, even using their cell phones to try and capture EVPs. But how do you separate the real deal from just random sounds?
It takes careful analysis and a healthy dose of skepticism. One of the pioneers in EVP research was Fredrik Jürgensen, a Swedish filmmaker who stumbled upon it accidentally in the 1950s while recording bird songs. He started hearing voices seemingly from deceased individuals embedded in the recordings. Some even spoke in languages he didn't understand.
That must have been a freaky surprise. So what did he do? Just chalk it up to a technical glitch?
Thankfully for us, he dove headfirst into the mystery. Jürgensen dedicated years to researching EVP, even collaborating with parapsychologists. He became convinced that these voices were not just random noise, but genuine communications from beyond. He even reported receiving messages from deceased loved ones, including his own mother.
So we're not talking about gibberish, but actual intelligible messages.
Yes, and Jürgensen's work ignited a wave of interest in EVP research. Another key figure was Konstantin Radiv, a Latvian psychologist who, initially skeptical, became a believer after conducting extensive recordings. He even received messages in different languages, including his native Latvian.
It's like these voices were tailoring their communication to the listener.
Precisely. And this pattern of personalized messages is common in credible EVP research. Radiv even noted distinct voice characteristics and accents in the recordings, which made it harder to explain them away as just random interference.
But EVP isn't the only type of ITC, right? What about those ghostly images on TV screens?
That's video instrumental transcommunication, or VTC, where seemingly anomalous images or videos appear on screens, often in the static of blank recordings.
People intentionally record blank tapes hoping to capture ghostly images. Now that's dedication.
For those deeply involved in this research, it's about pushing the boundaries of what we understand about consciousness and its potential interactions with technology.
So are there any compelling VTC cases? Or is it all just blurry, indistinguishable shapes that could be anything?
There have been intriguing cases, though. VTC is generally more challenging to document and analyze than EVP. One example is the work of Klaus Schreiber, a German physicist who built a device called the Vidicom, specifically to capture images from the other side.
A ghost hunting camcorder.
Yeah.
Those early images must have been pretty low res.
The technology was definitely limited, but Schreiber reported capturing images of faces, sometimes even moving images seemingly of deceased individuals.
Wow. And our sources mention a couple, the Harsh Fish Box from Luxembourg, who got some incredible results with VTC, even receiving messages from historical figures.
Their work is considered some of the most compelling evidence for VTC. They seemingly received messages from people like Wernher von Braun, the rocket scientist, and even Paracelsus, a 16th century alchemist.
It's like a history channel from beyond.
Precisely. And their work, along with others, raises profound questions about the nature of time and consciousness. If we can communicate with people from the past, what does that say about consciousness's continuity and the interconnectedness of everything?
Whoa, deep thoughts. But how do you even know they're communicating with who they think they are? Couldn't it be subconscious projections or even hoaxes?
Those are valid concerns, and researchers emphasize the importance of corroboration and consistency. For example, if multiple mediums working independently receive similar messages from the same source, or if information can be verified through historical records, it strengthens the case for authenticity.
Like building a case in court needing multiple pieces of evidence pointing to the same conclusion.
Exactly. And sometimes the information is so specific, so unlikely to be known by the researcher, that it challenges conventional explanations.
Like with Marcello Bacci, the Italian psychic who used a modified radio to communicate with the deceased. He even connected with you during one of his sessions.
Yes. Bacci's case is interesting because it involves real-time communication, often with specific details, and even recognition of individuals present. While I remain open to the possibility that there may be more to his work than we currently understand, it's also important to acknowledge that there have been allegations of fraud surrounding his methods.
Ah, that pesky issue of fraud, again, always casting a shadow of doubt. It makes it hard to embrace the full potential of communication with the other side.
It's an unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
But the potential for ITC to revolutionize our understanding of consciousness is so significant that continued research is warranted, even with the inherent challenges of proving authenticity.
So it's a high-risk, high-reward kind of research, pushing the boundaries of what we think we know.
Exactly. ITC isn't just about talking to the dead. It's about exploring the nature of consciousness and whether it can exist and operate beyond the limitations we usually put on it.
It's like opening a door to a whole new dimension of reality with all its mysteries and possibilities.
Well said. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle we'll be exploring in this deep dive: past life recollections and reincarnation type experiences.
Okay, so we've journeyed through some pretty mind-blowing territory: NDEs, apparitions, mediums, and even electronic voices from beyond.
Yeah.
Now we're diving into the deep end of the pool with past lives and reincarnation.
All right.
Is this stuff just the stuff of fantasy and New Age beliefs, or could there be something more to it?
It's a topic that has captivated humans for centuries. And while it might seem far out there to some, there's actually a growing body of research exploring past life recollections and reincarnation type experiences.
Oh, really?
Yeah, particularly through past life regression.
So past life regression is like using hypnosis to access memories from supposed previous lives.
Right.
But is that even a legitimate thing? Couldn't people just be making stuff up under hypnosis?
It's a valid concern. But consider that regression therapy has been used effectively for decades to help people access and process traumatic memories from their current lives. So the idea that it could potentially tap into memories from previous lives is not entirely implausible.
Okay, I'm willing to keep an open mind. So who are some of the big names in past life regression research, and are there any cases that really stand out as evidence for this whole past lives thing?
Well, one of the pioneers was Albert de Rochas, a French researcher who used hypnosis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries to regress individuals into what seemed to be past lives. He meticulously documented numerous cases, cross-referencing the information with historical records and other evidence. So it wasn't just people making up stories. They were recalling specific details that could actually be verified.
Yes, and some of de Rocha's cases are quite compelling. For instance, one of his subjects, Josephine, recalled details from two past lives. One as a male soldier named Jean-Claude Bourdon, and another as a woman named Philomène Chapini de Rochas, was able to corroborate many of the details, including names, locations, and even specific events. That's pretty impressive, like solving a historical mystery through hypnosis.
Yeah.
But de Rochas wasn't the only one exploring this, right?
No. There have been many researchers in the 20th and 21st centuries who have investigated past life recollections. One of the most famous cases is that of Bridie Murphy, a supposed past life persona of a woman named Virginia Tighe. Under hypnosis, she seemingly recalled a life in 19th century Ireland, giving details about her life, her family, and even specific places in Cork that were later verified.
Bridie Murphy, that rings a bell. It was a huge sensation back in the 50s, wasn't it? Didn't they even make a movie about it?
Yes, the case generated a lot of attention, both from the public and from skeptics who questioned its authenticity. There were claims that Tighe might have subconsciously fabricated the memories or drawn on stories she'd heard as a child. But even with the controversy, the case sparked a wave of interest in past life regression and highlighted the challenges of interpreting these types of experiences.
It's understandable that there would be skepticism, especially with a case as famous as Bridie Murphy. But what about those cases where the memories are spontaneous, not induced by hypnosis? Like those stories of young children who claim to remember past lives.
Those cases are particularly compelling. Researchers like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker have focused on these instances where children, often as young as 2 or 3, start talking about past lives, sometimes with remarkable detail and emotional intensity.
I've heard about these cases. It's both fascinating and a little bit heartbreaking to think of these young kids having these vivid memories, sometimes even birthmarks or phobias that seem to connect to their past life persona.
It's definitely a complex and often emotional area of research. Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, dedicated decades to investigating these cases, traveling the world, interviewing children and their families, and meticulously documenting their claims. His research, while not without its critics, is considered some of the most rigorous in the field.
And Stevenson's work paved the way for researchers like Jim Tucker, who continues to investigate these cases, focusing on the psychological and emotional aspects of these experiences.
Yes, Tucker's research has shown that many of these children have strong emotions associated with their past lives, often expressing sadness or longing for their former families, or fears related to how they died in their past lives.
That's both intriguing and a bit eerie. It's almost like their past life persona is still a part of them, influencing their feelings and perceptions. Are there any specific cases that stand out as particularly strong evidence for reincarnation?
There are a number of cases that researchers find particularly compelling. One is the case of Maten Ongmayo, a Burmese girl who had a debilitating fear of airplanes. She claimed to have been a Japanese soldier killed by aircraft fire during World War II.
And didn't she have a birthmark that corresponded to a wound the soldier supposedly received?
Yes, she had a birthmark on her groin that her family believed matched a bullet wound. She also showed behaviors and preferences that seemed unusual for her upbringing, but aligned with her claimed past life as a Japanese soldier.
Wow, that's a pretty striking case. And there's also the story of Swarnalata Mishra, the Indian girl who claimed to remember a past life as Bia Pathak. She seemingly recalled incredibly specific details about her past life, including names, relationships, locations, and even events, all of which were later confirmed.
Swarnlata's case, like many others, highlights the level of detail and accuracy that some children exhibit when recounting past life memories. It's hard to explain away as mere coincidence or fantasy.
It really is. And then there's the case of the Pollock twins, which some people see as evidence for a kind of double reincarnation. Their twin daughters, Jennifer and Gillian, were born after the tragic deaths of their older sisters, Jacqueline and Joanna. Jennifer had birthmarks that corresponded to injuries sustained by Jacqueline, and both twins seemed to recognize places and toys from their supposed past lives.
The Pollock twins case is both fascinating and tragic. While some suggest it could be explained by the parents' grief influencing the twins' behavior, others find the similarities and the specific details too compelling to dismiss.
It's like those cases where children have birthmarks that match injuries or even causes of death from their supposed past lives. How do you explain that from a purely conventional perspective?
That's one of the most challenging aspects for conventional explanations. Some propose that these birthmarks might be psychosomatic, a physical manifestation of a subconscious belief in a past life. Others suggest they might relate to cellular memory, the idea that cells retain some kind of imprint or memory from previous lifetimes.
Cellular memory, that's a fascinating idea. Is there any scientific backing for that?
It's still very much a speculative area of research with no definitive proof, but there are some intriguing clues, like the phenomenon of organ transplant recipients seemingly inheriting personality traits or memories from the donor.
Wow, that's like getting a personality upgrade along with your new heart or liver.
It's definitely a thought-provoking concept, and it speaks to the idea that consciousness might not be solely confined to the brain, but could be more interconnected with the body and perhaps even the world around us than we currently understand.
So what's the bottom line here? Are past life recollections and these reincarnation-type experiences solid proof that we've all lived before, or are there other explanations we should be considering?
As with most things in this realm, there are no easy answers. The evidence is suggestive and some cases are incredibly compelling, but there's always the possibility of alternative explanations such as false memories, subconscious influence, or even hoaxes.
Right, it's a cosmic mystery with lots of clues, but no definitive solution. It's all very intriguing, but how do we connect all these dots? We've got NDEs, apparitions, mediums, electronic voices, past life memories. Is there some overarching concept that might help us make sense of it all?
That's where the Akashic Field comes in. It's a concept that's been around for centuries, originating in ancient Eastern philosophies. But it's gaining traction in modern scientific and metaphysical circles as a potential explanation for some of these mysteries.
Okay, remind me, what exactly is the Akashic Field? Is it like some cosmic cloud storage system for consciousness?
Haha, that's a great analogy. The word Akasha comes from Sanskrit and refers to a kind of primordial substance or ether that permeates all of existence. Essentially, the Akashic Field is a proposed universal information field. a cosmic library that records every thought, action, emotion, and experience that has ever occurred.
Wow, that's a lot of data. So everything that's ever happened, everything that ever will happen is stored in this Akashic field.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's a bold concept and still very much theoretical, but it offers a way to understand how information seemingly from the past or even from other lifetimes might be accessed or perceived.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So, if the Akashic field exists, how does it relate to consciousness? Are you saying that our minds are somehow connected to this vast cosmic database?
Exactly. The Akashic Field isn't just a passive repository of information. It's a dynamic, interconnected field of consciousness. Our individual minds, according to this theory, are like drops of water in a vast ocean. We are all connected to this universal consciousness, and through it, we have the potential to access information and experiences beyond our individual limitations.
So, you're saying that things like NDEs, apparitions, mediumship, even past life memories could all be explained by individuals somehow tapping into this Akashic field?
That's one way to interpret these phenomena. If consciousness is not limited to the brain, if it's more like an energy or frequency that exists and interacts beyond the physical body, then the Akashic field could be the medium through which this interaction takes place.
Okay, let's break this down. How might the Akashic field explain, say, a near-death experience?
During an NDE, when someone is close to death, their consciousness might detach from their physical body and expand into this broader field of awareness, the Akashic field. In that expanded state, they might perceive information and experiences that are usually inaccessible to the conscious mind.
That would explain those feelings of being outside one's body. The panoramic life review, even encounters with deceased loved ones that people often describe.
Exactly. And it might also explain that profound sense of peace and interconnectedness that many NDE experiencers report. They're experiencing their connection to this universal consciousness.
Okay, so what about apparitions and after-death communication? Where does the Akashic field fit in there?
Think of it this way. The consciousness of the deceased individual might be imprinted in the Akashic field, like an energetic signature or memory trace. Under certain conditions, perhaps through intense emotion or a strong connection between the living and the deceased, those imprints might be activated, allowing for communication or even a visual manifestation, an apparition.
It's like tuning into a specific frequency on a cosmic radio only. Instead of music, you're getting messages from the other side.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just about receiving information, it's also about intention and connection. Just as we use radio waves to send messages, our thoughts, emotions, and intentions might interact with the Akashic field, potentially influencing or shaping those energetic imprints.
Wow, that's a powerful idea. So you're suggesting we might be able to learn to intentionally access the Akashic field and tap into this cosmic knowledge.
Many researchers and mystics believe that through practices like meditation, altered states of consciousness, or specific spiritual practices, we can learn to tune into the Akashic field and access its vast storehouse of information and wisdom.
So it's like learning to become a cosmic librarian. But this is all starting to sound very spiritual and mystical. Is there any scientific evidence for the Akashic field or the idea that consciousness can interact with it?
That's one of the challenges. The Akashic field bridges science and spirituality and is tough to prove or disprove using our typical scientific methods.
Right, it's like trying to measure a dream with a ruler.
Exactly. But there are some exciting areas of scientific exploration that might shed light on the concept. The holographic universe idea, for example, where the universe is seen as a giant hologram with information encoded at its boundaries, has parallels with the Akashic field theory.
Okay, I see the connection. And what about quantum entanglement, where particles are linked across vast distances? Doesn't that suggest instant information sharing across space and time?
Yes, quantum entanglement challenges our traditional understanding of cause and effect, hinting at non-local connections, where information might be accessed or shared across time and space.
It's like the universe has its own super fast, super weird internet.
Precisely. And then there's biophotonics, the study of light emitted from living organisms. Some researchers think these biophotons might play a role in communication between cells and even between organisms, potentially connecting us to a broader field of consciousness.
So we could be emitting and receiving information through light, like some biological Wi-Fi network.
It's an intriguing possibility. And it supports the idea that we're not isolated beings, but interconnected nodes in a vast web of life and consciousness.
We've come a long way, haven't we? From ghosts in the machine to a holographic universe, biophotons, and the Akashic field. So what's the takeaway? What does all this mean for how we see life, death, and the universe?
That's the ultimate question. If consciousness isn't limited to the brain, if it persists beyond death and is interconnected through something like the Akashic Field, it fundamentally changes how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
Right. It's like we're not just these separate physical beings, but part of something much grander, something eternal and interconnected.
Exactly. And it raises profound questions about the nature of reality itself. What if consciousness is fundamental, the very foundation of being, as some mystics and philosophers have proposed? Then the material world might be a projection or a manifestation of consciousness rather than the other way around.
Whoa, that's a major paradigm shift. So you're saying the universe might be more like a thought than a thing.
It's a radical concept, but one that's gaining traction. And it aligns with the experiences of many mystics and spiritual traditions who have described a reality where consciousness is primary, where the universe is a manifestation of divine mind.
Okay, I need a minute to process all of this. We've explored a lot in this deep dive. NDEs, apparitions, mediums, electronic voices, past life memories, the Akashic Field. It's a lot to absorb. As we wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway for our listeners? What should they ponder as they go about their day?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious, to keep an open mind, and to be willing to question what we think we know. The exploration of consciousness is an ongoing journey, not a destination. We may not have all the answers, but the very act of asking these questions, of seeking understanding, can be transformative.
Absolutely. It's about expanding our awareness, exploring the possibilities, and realizing that there might be more to reality than meets the eye.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's about considering that we might be more than we think we are, that our consciousness might be part of something vast, interconnected, and eternal.
Well said. Thanks for being our guide on this incredible deep dive. It's been an amazing journey.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, keep those minds open and keep exploring. Who knows what incredible discoveries await us as we continue to delve into the mysteries of consciousness and the universe we call home.
I can't wait to find out.
That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep those minds open and those questions flowing.